Welcome everyone to Political Paradigm. I'm Terry Ekumi. Today my guest is the founder of Fix Politics Nigeria and the chair of School of Politics, Policy and Governance, who is also the former Minister of Education, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. Welcome to Political Paradigm again.
Thank you, Terry.
You know, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. I also noticed that you have been quite evasive, should I use the word, of interviews. You've been airing your opinions on other platforms, but not had a sit down like this. So I very much appreciate you for finding time to do this.
You know, my schedule is crazy. So, you know, balancing out all of it is tough. I spend a lot of time, you know, abroad. So it is quite tough to be able to do all of the things that I would love to do, but cannot do.
Absolutely. I think it's best to just start off with the issue of the Supreme Court's judgment, because I've seen your takes on it, and I'd like to get like a base to this conversation, what your thoughts are with regards to the Supreme Court's judgment that affirmed the victory of President Bola Tinubu.
Well, I have made it, you know, publicly clear that I do not agree with the judgment. You know, the basis of my disagreement with the judgment is in the judgment itself. It's in the fact that, you know, this judgment does not in any way address the critical issues that are very evident to those who have genuinely followed the case. And all the issues emanating from the appellant's, you know, basic call on the courts. And the key thing for me is that there's a whole cloud of doubt about everything that the winner and the winning of the election represent. And that is not in any way something that gives us a basis for conferring legitimacy on that which the court, which a justice who's just retired, in fact, has helped to validate that our courts are now corrupted in many ways, and that cloud of a corrupted judicial system is hanging over the judgment by the Supreme Court. Go back and read Justice Daaji's speech at his valedictory. He even quoted his colleague Adefope that left the judiciary earlier in May this year. I mean, I read the entire thing. Anyone reading that should worry about the judiciary. As a matter of fact, I mean, I started worrying about the judiciary when Olisa Bakoba made some statement about the judiciary. It was either earlier this year or last year. He talked about the judiciary extensively. And as one who's known Olisa from the days of, you know, a common fight against militarization in this society, I didn't take his word lightly at all. In fact, I recall after listening to him, I think it was on your TV channel, it was an interview. After listening to him, I said to my husband, our situation is deeper than we think. You know what I mean? So we do know that from my days in Transparency International, that corruption is cancerous. When corruption becomes endemic, when it becomes systemic in a society, it has a way of afflicting all institutional processes, all structures, all decisions in ways that the cancerous cells attack the human body. It's a similar kind of thing. So it doesn't spare anything in its way. It's very clear now that we took it for granted that we could just carry on as this corruption thing spread in our society. And now it's taken it to the point where nothing, hardly anything is standing. You know, look at INEC. INEC is lost everything in the last elections. It's an organization that shockingly just decided to pick defeat from the jaws of victory, because it was getting to the place where citizens, especially the younger generation of citizens, were thinking, oh, we have an institution we can trust. It's made all of these promises. We're going to, really see democracy in action. And then it just goes 180 degrees away from everything. And so the electoral process just really got messed up severely. And then through the court processes, we see a repeat of institutions not acting credibly. A lot of the people who are the legal luminaries, when they've made their opinions on the whole judicial process, they have often just, really attacked things that have been adjudicated on the basis of technicalities, where the substance of the matter no longer really gets to be the basis of outcomes of the judicial process. And now, considering that we are no longer allowing the citizens to be the ones determining electoral outcomes, that it is the courts determining that, and juxtapose that with the joyfulness with which incumbent parties normally would say to the other parties, if you don't like the outcome, go to court. I mean, it tells you that something has gone wrong.
You've said quite a lot with regard to the judgment and linking that to the performance of the Independent National Electoral Commission, which has been questioned since the process. But I'd like us to sit with it, because I saw an article that questioned your position on this judgment. And for some, or perhaps the person who wrote that article, he was questioning what facts you were presented to question the judgment of the Supreme Court. And you've also just said that that judgment was supposed to address critical issues. What are those critical issues that should have been addressed in this judgment?
Well, did you see any thing that the Supreme Court said about the matter of drug-related offenses that were placed before it? There was no such thing. Things like that go to the heart of the character of the person who will lead a country. It's a big reputational risk for our country. When they talked about the matter of the president's certificate forgery, did you see that the substance of the matter was addressed? No, it was technical issue that on the basis of that they basically dismissed what the appellants were saying. So anyone who sort of says that they can argue in favor of the judgment of the Supreme Court, they are entitled to their opinion, but they should please pass me on, not having sufficient basis on which to say I do not agree with that judgment.
I've had a few conversations with lawyers on this matter as well. They say one thing, that there's a clear difference between what the law says and what it should be, and then there are concerns as to morality and technicality, as you put it. One lawyer says to me that the president may be liable on cases of forgery and the drug-related issue, but he enjoys immunity right now. So the Supreme Court focused on issues that the appeal court had dealt with because of that. Does that make sense to you?
Well, you and I cannot say that, we cannot say that anybody's position is, what would I say, is universally accurate in this matter, because as you can see, all you need to do would be to bring different lawyers into a room and they'll have their different positions. But for those of us who are, electorates and who have reasonable education and can follow the arguments on the basis of the facts that have been presented on matters, we can look at the arguments, and say, okay, why is this not quite making sense? Because if you, on technical grounds, are dismissing very potent issues that have been presented by the other side, you have every reason to face questioning and scrutiny by your citizens. The Supreme Court was not as a matter of fact, the courts were not easily doubted in our country for many decades. I mean, there was a time when if the justices of the Supreme Court, the Kayode Eshors, the Justice Uputas, the Adefara Saints, when they passed judgment, nobody said a word. I mean, like nobody said a word. And then political rascality entered into our society, and politicians began to buy up lawyers who corrupted the courts. It's a justice of the Supreme Court, leaving the Supreme Court, that said this. I read it, just like any other person. So I'm not the citizen without knowledge, because, I cannot pride myself of having those kinds of knowledge. But if someone who is a justice of the Supreme Court says that these are the issues clouding the reputation of the judiciary, and that the judiciary is now living with scorn by citizens, questioning its credibility, then it shouldn't be me you worry about. You should be worried about that institution. And all of us as citizens should be worried, because frankly speaking, everything about our existence as a country is anchored on the principles of the rule of law, and who is which of the three arms of government really own the duty of guaranteeing this. It is the judiciary. The judiciary was often called the hope, the last hope
of a common man.
Of the common man. Well, I don't even think that.
But is this a hopeless situation? because while some argue that it could be corruption, there are those who argue that it could be executive intimidation. So is it a completely hopeless situation?
Well, whichever one it may be, what you still end up with is that the independence and the integrity of the judiciary is compromised. Look at what happened with our elections. Why is this gentleman, what's his name?
The champ?
No, Akpabio, sitting in the Senate? Why? This was a person who the judiciary basically handed an unconstitutional right to be elected a senator, considering that he was jostling for two positions at the same time. What's that? It negated the rules of the game. The judiciary handed it over to him. Now, he won as a senator and is sitting as Senate president on lawlessness. How about the former president of the Senate? It was a similar thing. How do you run a society recklessly like this? How do you say you're a democracy and you don't respect democratic ethos? It's not a way that supports a progressive mindset for society. And so it is very clear that the political class of our country want to ruin this country. There's no, you can't argue otherwise on the basis of the evidence of rascality that we have seen. You mow down institutions like INEC by just turning it into a theater of politicians compromising its independence, and then just literally taking the opposite of what its rules say. I think that the greatest danger, the greatest peril that our democracy faces does not come from any other quarters.
But the judiciary.
But the political class. The political class are endangering our democracy. And what they've done is that they've pulled in the judiciary into it. In the past, we could reasonably expect the judiciary to be independent. But now, it lost out. Once your society begins to doubt you, why did we not have this level of doubt of our judiciary in time past, Terry?
That was why I asked initially if it was a hopeless situation, because who has the power, or on whose shoulder does it lie to reform the judiciary? The political class.
Well, that's what they call being in a prisoner's dilemma that we find ourselves. And, when a situation like this, that is frankly very dangerous, exists, ultimately, there has to be some mechanism that brings everyone back to the table. And I think that we really are at a place in our whole political experiment where that conversation on what do we really want to be. Even right now, the country is facing multiple levels of crisis, because the political wind is still blowing, and it's not a good kind of wind. The lack of political legitimacy, the kind of legitimacy that is conferred by both those who voted for you and those who didn't vote for you, is lacking. It's lacking. There is, there is a big deficit in the way that we should be politically, the kind of cohesion. People have lost election in this country before, and people just said, it's a lost election. That's okay, we just move on. But not this kind of a situation. This is a very different one, Terry. And then it's happening at a time when we don't have the kind of economic strength and resilience that we previously had at a relative level, And so you look around you, our social capital is vastly eroded, So on what anchors are we now standing? So it does mean that at a certain level, we will be forced as a society to really look at ourselves and say, how do we take the lessons of this season to design a pathway?
Dr. Ezekwesili, you have traveled the world. You have seen how governments work. You have seen nations function appropriately. You have seen institutions hold sway. From your travels, how have other nations that have done it been able to have a judicial system that is trustworthy? Compare that to what we have today and the revelations that keep coming out, and how we could perhaps make progress.
That's why I said that we're in a sort of prisoner's dilemma situation. I was reading the Justice Daaji, farewell speech to his colleagues at the Supreme Court. And when he listed the number of responsibilities of the Chief Justice of the Federation of Nigeria, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, CJN, and the fact that he has such sole power, enormous powers, is similar to what people say about the office of the President of Nigeria being saddled with enormous powers, to the utter lack of accountability sometimes that poses. And in stating that, he was in fact alluding to the exclusion of accountability in the judicial, in the judicial system, in the justice system. So those kinds of things go to the heart of the structure of a society, the way that a society is structured to work. I have often maintained that, we do need to take a look at our constitution comprehensively. We're not well served, at least not. If we were fairly well served by the 1999 Constitution, that was a transition constitution from the military to enable us kickstart our democracy. If we were fairly well served by it, because we just carried on with it. Not anymore. I think that the gaps have become so debilitating, and so in some circumstances, as you did say, in some countries, when they've been forced to have to look at themselves in a candid way, what has had to happen is that citizens have forced the country and its people to the table to say, let's look at our constitution. So a typical example is Kenya. After those 2010, 2011 situation in Kenya, what dug them out of the labyrinth they were going to enter into was this kind of, an enabled process to really look at the Constitution and to give everybody a sense that they could live with a new set of grand norms that would enable society to function. We have to get there.
Well, we've been reviewing the Constitution.
No, your politicians have been reviewing the Constitution for a while. You haven't.
So what will be
Terry,
different this time?
What would be different is that the citizens will be very integral to that process. We haven't had constitutions that the citizens were the center of. It's always been the political class choosing amongst themselves. And as I said to you, we have a problem with our political class. The fact is that we are a people who are given to not wanting to face that which is not right about us. We don't have to. There's a problem with our political class. If the political class wants to pretend, they can pretend. But I don't think the citizens should join them in that pretense.
Let me draw your attention to something. Now that you mentioned that, former Minister of Transportation recently said something where he sort of blamed the rascality of the political class on the citizens' lack of reaction to it. Does that make sense to you?
When did he discover this?
I wish I had an answer to that, but I think that's part of the questions that were asked him based on what we saw online when that went viral.
When what went viral?
When his speech went viral, saying that the citizens, Nigerians, take anything and they don't react, and that is why politicians can go ahead with their rascality and get away with it, because there are no reactions from the people.
I have no opinion on that because I don't know when he discovered that.
But do you think that the Nigerian citizen is enabling the politician in any way?
I think that two truths can reside in every situation, in the sense that for our democracy, I mean, two truths can, can stand side by side in our democracy on the role of citizens and the political class. But it would be very disingenuous to basically say to long-suffering citizens that, hey, had you been sensible, then your politicians would be sensible. I think that is actually very annoying. That is very self-serving, and we should not even condone it coming from someone who was part of an administration that basically took this country many notches down the abyss. So I feel that what we need to clearly, of course, recognize is that citizens have an important role in determining their democracy. I have that very solid perspective that the citizens own democracy and the citizens will fix democracy. But please pass me with any kind of story from one who did not recognize that power of citizens to demand for democratic accountability at the time that they were running the country aground.
You said something. You said the fight for a good society has only now started. And we know that nothing can defeat a people who have had enough of the invasive cancer of corruption and criminality. How does that relate? I think it does to an extent with what you've just said, following the statement of the former minister.
Democracy, again, as I said, is owned by the people. We need to engage our electorate in all kinds of ways that will empower them, especially the low-income class that live for a day and therefore are willing to transact on that day with the most important power they have, which is the power of the thumb to vote. We need to get them to the place where they can influence electoral outcomes without self-sabotaging. They self-sabotage today, and those choices they make to take a bag of rice or to take a few thousand naira from a corrupted political class. The gentleman should be talking to the corrupted political class, not to the citizens. What we should be doing with the citizens is figuring out ways outside of the electoral cycle to engage them with the kind of enlightenment and empowerment, because in a number of the cases where people do economic empowerment of young people or of women, they do those skills acquisition thing. We're saying to them some of the things they need to know about democracy, so that as they are gaining their economic empowerment, they are also learning the power of governance, that policies are important, and that when policies are sound, they will do better. And so they're preparing them with a different mindset to engage. Their economic empowerment and political literacy will go together to enable them be the kind of electorate that can influence electoral outcomes. Today's electorate in Nigeria are so disempowered that they can't influence electoral outcomes at the low income level. Now, at the middle class level, you've got people who all the while were thinking that they had escaped poverty. They now see that it was unrealistic to not care about politics because you feel you have escaped poverty. All you needed was for a bunch of politicians to ruin the governance of the country, ruin its political, its economic possibilities, and people dropped into poverty. There are middle-class families now that have dropped into poverty because the middle class paid no attention to politics. So those are the kinds of conversations we should be having. I don't want to be setting an agenda for discussion of democracy on the basis of statements made by people who should be accounting for failure.
As it stands now, you urged the citizens who took part in the electioneering process not to despair. And the question now is, yes, there are those who feel hard done by the system, who came all out. And there are those who now say they're in despair. But the question is, with this court judgment and where the country is today, I listened to the president say that all the shenanigans are over and then we can move forward. When you look at those
who was the president talking about shenanigans to? If there was any shenanigan, it was coming from the declared winner of the election. The citizens gave no shenanigans, and I do not think that those who competed with him in the elections gave shenanigans. All the shenanigans that the world associates our country with right now is coming just from one source, and that's from him.
You think it is over? Do we move on?
You know, someone once said recently, I think it was the interview I was referring to, he said something about moving on. I said, well, you know, we have always moved on to move back, right? In the sense that in our moving on, we have ended up being a country that just does not make progress. You know, we move forward. People say, oh, just move forward. Okay, let's just move forward. But moving forward to nowhere. You're moving forward because what we love to do is to not confront our problems. We're a society that people love, you know, people love to just wish things away. That's not how to live. You know, I'm having a very tough conversation with you right now. You know, that's what's going on. You would probably like me to not say the things that I am saying, but I am saying them. The reason I'm saying them is that we're better off confronting the demons that have seized upon our country. It's better for us to actually look at ourselves and say, all is not well. I am not amongst those people who like to pretend that all is well. You know, for 8 years, I criticized the economic policy direction of the administration that handed over on May 29th. Guess what? The people who are currently telling you that they met a really tough economic situation, that's what they inherited, were amongst those viscerally attacking my position that the economy was poorly managed. They went, so as at the time that the previous administration was ruining the economy of this country, everybody wanted to keep quiet. The right thing to do was to keep quiet, but I didn't keep quiet. I just hope that more Nigerians will not keep quiet when things are going wrong. I was known in the President Obasanjo's administration as that person who would not keep quiet. I didn't keep quiet in the administration that I was in. So I believe that we are a country that cannot just simply say, it has happened, all is well, just let's do kumbaya and move forward. Because we're not moving forward with that. Look, the economy is in distress. One of the key things that matter to investors, especially investors from abroad, is the quality of the judicial system. If our judiciary is caught in this web that it finds itself because of the failure of the electoral process to determine an outcome that even those who did not win the election would say, I didn't win. I didn't win next time. But we're dragged into a situation where the rules of the game just kept being changed as we go. It was almost like change as you go from INEC. And then the court processes just take it to another level. And then you go and you're telling investors to come and invest in your country. It's a harder job. It's a tough sell.
You think that the reputation of the president as it stands now would affect investments?
Not just the reputation of the president. I'm even saying that his reputation is a big baggage for us because, people are frequently asking us these days, oh dear, who do you have as president? And all of that is to mock the country, right? But beyond that is that the judiciary is the cornerstone of confidence in boardrooms, because everything about investors is their thinking in terms of the rule of law, because property rights and all the things that the courts have to determine when companies are doing exits, the courts matter and all of that. And if they see that this is what has become of our judiciary, it does matter. It will take many points away from us.
No, the National Assembly is saddled with the responsibility of making laws. One of the laws would be to also help the judiciary in areas where help is needed, as well as the Electoral Act Amendment. I understand now that the Senate has started the process of amending the Electoral Act. Coming from the election and the behavior of the Independent National Electoral Commission, which you and a lot of Nigerians are not comfortable with, what sort of amendments should the National Assembly be focusing on?
I think that the key amendment is this matter of electronic transmission of results. You can see that it was, everything that INEC promised, it basically did not deliver on. So we do need to have very clear provision on this transmission of results. The collation process is the weakest link, right? So there's a whole problem now in terms of what exactly is the definition of collation. And when we say we want to use technology to improve the transparency of the collation process, what explicit steps do we outline in the Electoral Act? I think the work is cut out for citizens to ensure that we would go further in achieving the success of such an amendment. The matter of the matter of who actually is the resident commissioners, who are the people who are involved in the electoral process. How are they appointed? Who appoints the INEC chairman? All of those things are back to the table. Because what we're saying is that the level of political control of INEC that exists is out of this world. So the INEC chairman or chairwoman, as the case may be, we have to just look at places like Kenya and see what we can learn from that whole independence of the electoral umpire. We have to look at the issue around the expectation from political parties in terms of the data that is required for contesting the electoral process. For example, we saw this particular issue of asking the political party to provide evidence of what it says it has been cheated of. Because, and then it says, oh, but, you know, INEC should give us access to such information. And INEC stonewalls. And the contestant is caught between, you know, the court saying, if you don't give us that evidence, then you don't know what you're talking about, to INEC, you know, just basically acting as a party in the case and protecting itself from that. I mean, we saw what do they call that results sheet from
ECA.
Yes, with all manner of crossings. I mean, like mutilated version, numbers transposed, and all of that. And yet, what has come out of it?
Did you say that the president should not be the one to appoint the INEC chairman?
There is a role that, you know, the citizens have. You know, there is a role that citizens have and the parliament has. So you can't just simply, you know, be appointed by the president and sent to the parliament and the parliament. Because what we've also seen of our democracy is how, you know, an Akpabio wears the cap to show he uses his cap as a symbolism of we're together in this journey. So the independence of the legislature is also questionable, you know. So we see that it's almost like a continuum. Oh, here we're here to do anything the president wants, and so you have to be careful. We have to be careful if we want to be the kind of democracy that delivers results. Then the principle of separation of power must be one that we all uphold as much as possible. That principle doesn't sort of suggest that there cannot be collaboration and understanding, but there must not be subservience. What we've seen is that the legislature is subservient to any president in our democracy, and that's problematic. So what that does is that it destroys the independence of institutions. So when Nigerians say we want institutions, well, what kind of institutions do you want? You want institutions in name, or you want institutions in fact?
So when you say that the president should not appoint the INEC chairman, who should appoint the INEC chairman?
It's not about the president not appointing the INEC chairman. It is about the process for the appointment of the INEC chairman. That process requires an independence that basically puts a lot of power in the hands of the electorate. So the electorate would have a right to see the entire process and be able to participate in it. And right now, we don't have a mechanism for doing that.
I don't think you have confidence in this National Assembly.
No, I have none. I actually have none.
Because of the leadership?
Yeah, because of we cannot have the kind of National Assembly that has not acted even wisely at all. I mean, first, I think I was told that about 300, some number, I don't remember the number now, that there are such number of cases in court over the seats that these people occupy. And we know that is something. 2023 held so much promise, and somewhere along the line, it just I don't know what happened, you know. So you have a National Assembly that that voted for itself to buy luxury SUVs while telling the citizens who are going through terrible financial distress that came as a result of poor economic governance of their country to sacrifice. But, oh, by the way, we need to buy new cars for ourselves. How do you trust that kind of a legislature? The National Assembly has to earn that trust. It has to earn that respect. It has. If there's actually an institution that has failed the people the most in this democracy until the judiciary joined, it's the National Assembly. Because even, the executive can do the things that they do only because of a weak National Assembly. And, I was in government, and when I was in government, it mattered to me to be so responsive to the National Assembly. I wanted to model that behavior because I wanted that if I left government, I wanted to see the National Assembly being respected. So I respected the National. Anytime any committee of the National Assembly wanted me to appear before them to, account for my role, for my work, I just went before them. I went before them because I believe very much in that role of oversight. There's no society that denigrates oversight and accountability and makes it. You can't, because whatever is not inspected should not be expected.
The National Assembly, and defending this, I don't want to speak about what Senator Sunday Karimi said because that's already been called to question a number of times. But I've heard them say that the executive arm of government, especially the ministers, get to take home new vehicles when they get into office, official vehicles per se. And I've also heard lawmakers say that the vehicles that are being purchased now are not properties of the lawmakers, that belong to the National Assembly. Every 4 years, it has to be changed. But then I've also seen that you've come to the defense or try to explain the situation with the Labour Party lawmakers accepting these luxury SUVs. And it begs the question, do you feel like they should have done differently? Do you feel disappointed in them accepting to be a part of this largesse?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you see, there is nothing that works as much as consistency. My father raised us and said that character is not complete until it is consistent. I say that because I have been consistent in saying that we have a political class problem. It's not the acronym of the party that matters. We've seen the migratory dance. Some of the people that you see calling themselves APC or PDP or whatever else, they've been through all of the parties. When you see them, you have to ask them which one are you in now, so that you know how to have a conversation, right? So really, it's not the party acronym, it's the political class. We have a low-cost type political class. This is me in my candid rendition again. A low-cost type political class does not build. It scatters. It eats up. It destroys. We have a destructive political class. I know that I take very unpopular positions, It's not out of a desire to be contrarian, no. It's not out of a desire to be different, no. It is simply that we must call a spade, not an agricultural implement. We have a political class problem. So once they get to the National Assembly, everybody just acts together. That's why you didn't hear a whimper from any side of the aisle on this matter of spending such colossal amount at a time that you're asking your citizens to sacrifice to buy new luxury SUVs for yourselves.
Look.
And think of it from the perspective of this conversation becoming, but the people in the executive are buying cars for themselves. Oh, but the people in local government are buying cars for themselves. Oh, how about state? Who is providing leadership here for this country? Who really? How can it be? How can you justify that which is not wise on the basis of the foolishness of others? I have been a minister. I was Minister of Minerals. When I got to the ministry, my then Permanent Secretary, Abukizawa, said, Madam Minister, this is memo so that we can purchase your cars for the ministry. I said, what do you mean? Where are the cars that my predecessor left behind? Oh, they are in poor shape. I said, okay, take them and let's repair them, because I am not buying any car. He said to me that the only car that was left behind is the one that has traveled the most on the road, and that my predecessor used to go back to his community every week, and so that the mileage was so much. I said to him, the distance between my home and the ministry is not that far. It should still be fine to use that car. That's what happened. When I went to education, it was a similar thing. I used the car of my predecessor. We cannot do this to ourselves. Public office is not a place for indulgence. This whole idea of thinking that the good life you couldn't earn for yourself as a professional, as a private sector person, as an entrepreneur, you can get it in the public service. That's why the country is the way it is. There is no way you can pervert the basic raison d'etre, the purpose of existence of government. You pervert it, you distort it into government is a place to live large, and then you think you can be the basis of making the right decisions for development. No, not one country that went from poverty to middle income, high income, was governed by people who make decisions like our political class make here. Politicians in our country, in our continent, subordinate the common good to their personal and private interest. And that's terrible.
Dr. Ezekwesili, our time is fast spent, but I'll leave you with this question. You've been in government, you've traveled internationally, you're an international bureaucrat, so you understand governance and development. While you question a lot of things that have happened, I would like to get an honest take with regards to this administration so far. One, if it's moving in the right direction, and perhaps you can react to the allegations of lopsided appointments made so far.
I haven't bothered to pay attention
To anything happening in the country?
to any kind of appointments. Because as far as I was concerned, the political process, the electoral process, had not ended. So I didn't pay any attention.
Has it ended for you now?
Not really.
So what's next?
We watch.
I'd like to thank you very much for your time. It's always a delight speaking with you.
Thank you, Terry.
And thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Well, I've been speaking with Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, who is no stranger to Nigerian politics and governance. If you'd like to catch this episode and more, please go to YouTube and search Political Paradigm or go to channelstv.com. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.